Welcome back into the Long Shot Podcast, joined by Duke basketball legend, five-time Emmy nominee for Outstanding Sports Personality, New York Times best-selling author. I read that book, by the way. Actually, in 8th grade, I took my first charge about a week later, so I thought you'd enjoy that. But perhaps most importantly, he was named one of the top 100 most essential follows on Twitter. So please give him a follow if you haven't. That's by Sports Illustrated. Welcome in, Jay Bilas. Jay, thanks for joining us.
Duncan, thanks for having me. And by the way, I'm a 6-time Emmy loser now. I've lost Emmys in multiple years, so I've gotten really good at clapping for other people.
Hey, you were nominated, man. You gotta at least get nominated. Then we could take care of the winning from there. I want to dive right into the tournament. Obviously, just finished up on Monday night. I'm curious of your perspective. Obviously, you're super plugged into the college basketball landscape. For maybe the casual fan, they hear of Gonzaga all year long, the undefeated record, the chance to be the first team since IU to do it all the way through. Were you surprised at the outcome of Monday and Baylor just kind of running away with it in a lopsided victory?
Yeah, I was surprised that Baylor kicked their ass. I was not surprised Baylor won because those were the two best teams all year long. It kind of gave me the same feeling as, going back to 2006 with football, kind of USC versus Texas, when USC was, considered the best team. They get beat, and then people question, well, were they really that good? That as if you're not allowed to lose in sports. And then also this year's Super Bowl, like, it reminded me a lot of, sort of what we thought about the Chiefs going into the Super Bowl, that, man, who can stop this offense? This offense is unbelievable. They got Mahomes and they got bullied by the Buccaneers. And it was kind of the same feeling going into this game. And, Duncan, this better than I do, actually. The landscape has changed so much in sports, where people talk about, they've asked us as the commentators to pick who's going to win, to tell you who's going to win, because it riles people up and it gets interest up and all that stuff. Nobody knows who's going to win. Like, we think we know, like, the basis on which the game will be won. Like, here's where this team has a strength and the other team's got to counter it. Here are the great matchups and all that. But we don't know who's going to win these games. And that's kind of the beauty of it. But somehow we've positioned it as if somebody says this team's going to win, that they're automatically better. And then if they, how did we get it so wrong? Like, we didn't get it wrong. One team won. Those were the two best teams by far. And Gonzaga is kick-ass good. Like, they're really good. They got beat. And being a competitor yourself, like, you go into a game and you're ready to go. And sometimes you get it handed to you. And other times you hand it to the other team. And if anybody knew, we'd all be in Vegas sitting by the pool, counting our money. None of us know.
Yeah, I find it funny because Tuesday morning you wake up and you see all these headlines of, what does Gonzaga need to do to get to the next step? All this kind of stuff, as if winning a national championship isn't really, really hard. But I guess that's kind of a question that I have for you. And obviously Mark Few's done an incredible job there. But I'm curious if you think, and obviously I don't want to ask you to kind of like psychoanalyze Mark Few and his recruiting or maybe moving forward, but does this put pressure on him potentially to take a different approach of, he just got a guy in Jalen Suggs who was a 5-star recruit. In the past, they'd kind of done about it a different way. Do you think that this will kind of maybe push him to kind of go that route? Because they've shown that they can get those type of guys.
Well, I'll answer that by giving you an example first in your league. There's a saying that I think a lot of front offices have, and that's, be really careful of what you do when you think you're one player away. The idea, you think you're one player away, be careful what you do because you're really good now, that kind of thing. And Gonzaga, contemplate this for a second. So Gonzaga's gone to 6 straight Sweet 16s. They're the only team in the country that's done that. They've been to 4 of the last 8 Elite Eights. They've been in 2 of the last 4 title games. They're doing it as well, if not better, than anybody out there. The only thing on their resume that they don't have, and it's the only thing you can point to say, aha, they're not all that, is they haven't won it yet. But, Coach K, before he won his first one, went to 4 Final Fours. And I think it was 3 title games, something like that. Or maybe it's 2 title games before he won his first one. And I think Roy Williams, you can point to a lot of that stuff where guys had been there before, their programs had been there before, and they hadn't done it. And you know the feeling. I know it, haven't been in the title game and fallen just a little bit short. And you're like, for some reason that sticks with you longer than losing in the second round or something. I don't know why that is, because you're good enough and it didn't happen. And so when, like, if Gonzaga was just kind of going to Sweet 16s and Elite Eights and all that stuff, we'd be going, man, what a great program. That's terrific. But when you start talking about them with Carolina and Duke and all that, which we're doing now, and we should, because they're that good, I don't think they have to change anything. I don't think they have to get a different kind of player. They may need to get a little bit stronger physically in certain spots, but there are a lot of teams that need to do that. I mean, they just went up against an extraordinary team, the likes of which we don't see that. Like, you don't see Davion Mitchells very often. That dude's going to be in your league doing the same thing next year. And we're going to be talking about why wasn't he drafted higher? Like, I think he'd be top 10, but he's a disruptive force. And those other guys are legit. And so, the worst we can say about Gonzaga, if you really want it, the worst shot I think we can put at them is like, they were the second best team in the country. But how awful is that?
I want to stay on Baylor because I think that's the other side of this is once you do finally get over the hump, and especially a program like Baylor and how far they've come in the last 20 years, what does that do for them moving forward and how much easier it makes the job for Coach Drew?
I don't think it changes all that much. It's just validating, that you don't have to answer any more questions. And, when are we going to hang this banner? When are we going to do this? They've proven they can not only play on the elite level, they've been doing that for a dozen years now, but they've proven that they're championship caliber, and they've done it. And for some reason, and I don't know why this is in America, but you wind up all the things that are looked at as failures, and not winning a championship in a way is a failure. You failed to win the championship, which is your ultimate goal. But, you get to the championship game. That's an extraordinary success too. But somehow a championship sort of spotlights and illuminates all the other things that were looked upon as failures. And then they're considered tremendous successes. So now Baylor's Elite Eights and all that stuff. This is their first Final Four under Scott Drew, and obviously first championship. That makes everything else shine in a different way. It's not sort of there's no, that wasn't the limit before. And so now now the question is, can you do it again? Like, those are better questions to have to answer than can you do it at all? It's the, can you win the big one is to have to answer that question sucks. As a player, a coach, whatever, it's not a fun question to have to answer. And then when for the players, like, the coaches get to do it every year. Like, they get to keep trying every year. And the fans, I mean, this may be the wrong time to tell you this story, but after my team lost in the NCAA championship game, we were 37-2 and had won more games than any team had ever won in the history of the game. We lose by a bucket in the title game. And the next morning, my roommate and I are going down the elevator in the hotel to go get on the bus, get on the plane, go back to Durham. And a couple of Duke fans were in there, and one of them's kind of shaking his head and says, "Man, that was a tough one. You'll never know how hard it was to lose that game last night." And we're looking at the guy going, "I think we got a pretty good idea how tough it was. I bet you it hurts us more than it hurts you. Like, you get to be a fan forever." And that was our last chance at that. But that's the way people think for some reason. I don't know why that is.
I want to change gears a little bit and talk to you about kind of this player empowerment movement. You've been a huge advocate for players for a long time now. And specifically this year, there was, I felt, a lot of traction in players really finding their voice around the tournament. You saw the not NCAA property, hashtag that was thrown around, T-shirts that were being worn. I think we've seen in some of the adjustments that NCAA has made recently that they have kind of been feeling some pressure to at least, I don't know if you want to call it appease or acknowledge the shortcomings that is the NCAA in so many respects. I'm curious of your take on if you feel the NCAA is this an all-time high pressure moment for them? Are they feeling this this moment, particularly with players really finding their voice? Because I think it's one thing for, with all due respect, analysts and people who have played the game to put pressure on them, and a whole different one when the actual players who are going out there are starting to find their voice. Is it at an all-time high, do you believe?
Yes, because the players now realize the leverage that they have. And, look, there could be a time when the only thing the players can do is to walk out. But I'm not a fan of that, having to do that, because I think there are a lot of variables that go with it. But there are all kinds of pressure points on the NCAA right now. One is what's going on legally. So, as you know, there's a case going on. The United States Supreme Court is deciding the Alston case. That'll be decided in the next month or two. And that's limited in what it's going to do. It's more about educational expenses, but it does sort of take bricks out of the foundation of the amateurism principle. And I think, if you're reading the tea leaves, I don't know what the Supreme Court's going to do, but it seems like they're going to side with the players on that. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. Then there's the legislative side that states around the country are passing NIL legislation. It started in California, Florida, and now I don't know how many states there are. It's going so fast. And what that tells me is that that's what competition looks like, that a couple states do it. Other states are going, well, we can't be left behind in recruiting, because the most important thing in winning is players. It's not coaches, it's players. And they know that. And so the market is reacting to the competitive landscape changing. And then you have the NCAA. Now, they could have settled all this themselves by passing reasonable rules, and they've chosen not to do it because they just don't want to. And the one thing that has not changed from the time I was a player to you is how the athlete is treated. Everything else has changed. Like they've changed with the landscape in making money. You hear coaches all the time say, I didn't get into coaching for the money. Yeah, okay. Well, you didn't turn it down either. And every game now is on television. They are monetizing everything as if it's the NBA or the NFL. And one thing that people miss is, the NCAA, the organization itself, is not a league. It is a collection of leagues. So the Southeastern Conference, the Big Ten, the ACC, those are all their own little NFLs and NBAs. Like the Southeastern Conference is its own NFL. It's its own NBA. And so those leagues compete against each other for media rights and for players. And that ultimately, that's what the Supreme Court's going to be deciding is market competitors conspiring. And actually, a Supreme Court Justice Kavanaugh, used that word, conspiring to limit the wages of one class of worker, being the athlete. And one thing that I can't, I'm always trying to think of ways to, make the argument to the average Joe that's just a fan who thinks that players, look what they get. They get these great facilities. They get to fly on private planes. They get this. I'm going, well, the paid employees get it the same thing. And they said, well, the regular students don't get that. Well, the regular students don't get limited is what they don't get. Here's one thing an athlete gets that nobody else gets. They get limited. And more non-athletes are on scholarship than athletes. And they're not limited in what they can earn or accept. And that's really the issue is I get why people talk about gratitude. They say that, well, these kids, they want to infantilize the players. These kids, well, they're adults. It's called men's basketball and women's basketball. They're adults. And then they say they need to be grateful because I didn't have that opportunity. They need to be as if money and gratitude are mutually exclusive. You can be grateful and get your fair market value too. Because nobody's telling a non-athlete student on scholarship how grateful they need to be. It's only the athlete. And look at all the money we're making off these athletes. And look who's benefiting to the greatest extent. It's administrators and coaches. And that's great. I'm not saying they should be paid less. I'm saying that athletes should be allowed to compete in the marketplace under the same terms. And that is, sort of not being restricted. And if an individual school, like take Michigan, for example, because you went there, if Michigan decides, you know what, we're not going to pay our football coach $9 million a year. We're paying this amount, and we're not paying our basketball coach that as much as Duke or North Carolina. And we don't want our athletes doing these. Then do that. Then restrict them and see how it works out for you in the marketplace. That's what competition looks like. But everybody banding together saying none of us are allowed to do this. Like, could you imagine if the film industry banded together and say, all right, we're not going to pay. Like, look, we'll give child actors, we'll give them health care. We'll have tutors on site for them. Let's all agree we're not going to pay them more than this. Well, you think that the child actors, their parents are going to go? No, they're going to go, no. They'll be in court the next day, and it's the same thing with athletes. Now athletes are suing, they're winning, and the NCAA knows that. And Duncan, that's why you're seeing so many administrators quit now. Like a bunch of ADs are quitting. They're taking their retirement now because they're like, well, let somebody else figure this out. I've made my money, and I'm out. I don't want to do anything. I don't want to do this anymore. And that's revealing too.
Yeah, the sentiment that you share in regards to being grateful is one that certainly resonates with me because, I came from a small college and I get on campus at Michigan and I'm surrounded by these incredible facilities. All of a sudden, I'd been shelling out money to have people train me. Now it's people's jobs to train me. And it took me a little while to wrap my mind around the fact that you can be privileged and still be exploited. And exploitation is a word I think people jump at. And how are these kids exploited? They're on, they get all the meals and they're on these private planes and all this, this, that, and the other. But the reality is if you're not entitled to your market value, like you're saying, then it's a broken system. So my question for you is, in regards to the NCAA, at what point do they need to get get this quote unquote right? I mean, I know it's never going to be a perfect or buttoned up to where everybody's happy. I understand that, but what are at least the immediate steps here that you feel should be taken that we can get this to the point where, okay, we're at least heading really in the right direction here?
Okay, well, first of all, on let me just talk 1 second about the exploitation thing. So when you get pushback on the use of the word exploitation, that's a misdirection argument. So somebody will say, oh, they're not exploited. And then they don't like the use of that word. So they misdirect the argument from the true issue, which is the fair treatment of players, to I don't like that word. And then you wind up arguing over the use of the word and are they really exploited? And then they don't have to talk about the real issue. It's actually a clever rhetorical device that they use. But to your question, the NCAA is in a box now. They've fought so hard for so long on the amateurism hill and decided they were going to die on that hill without evolving on it. And they've made so many statements under oath in court that they're really screwed now. So even with NIL, like in one of the last cases, well, it's probably the Alston case, but it might have been O'Bannon, but I think it was Alston. It was Mark Emmert who testified under oath that if players are allowed name, image, and likeness rights, they are professionals and nothing more than shills for products. So if you take that and another judge says, well, wait a minute, didn't you say that if they get NIL rights, they're pros? And now you're going to give them NIL rights. So you said you're making them pros. So why should we limit them at all? That's a tough argument that's a tough hill to get across for them now. And so they're going to keep fighting this until the government or the courts tell them they lose. And they're asking Congress to give them an antitrust exemption, essentially saying we need a federal law that preempts all these state laws and allows us to do this so that we're not getting sued all the time. And I don't think complaining about getting sued is a very good argument. It's like an automobile manufacturer saying, you know what, we're tired of getting sued over these damn seatbelts not being safe enough. Well, make them safer. That's the whole reason the court system exists. If they're not safe, and you shouldn't be asking Congress to say, tell everybody that this is okay. That enough people, some people can die with the seatbelt issue we have. We shouldn't be asked to spend more money on this and get sued over it. All that stuff. I mean, that might not be a perfect analogy, but that's what they're asking. They're asking the government, let us violate federal antitrust law and give us a special exemption. And I don't think that's a winning argument. They are not convincing a lot of people on Capitol Hill, and they're certainly losing deference from the court system. The judges aren't looking at them the same way they have in the past. So the best thing they can do, in my view, is look, nobody complains about Division II or Division III. because what Division II and Division III does is in line with its mission. They're not selling that product at a high level. So the fact that they don't pay, they don't allow this, they don't allow is not an issue. Division I has to change. It has to admit we are in the entertainment business, and we can do both. We can have eligibility rules as far as how long you can play and all that stuff. You have to be an enrolled student, but everything else we gotta let go. Until they're willing to do that, we're going to keep going down this road, and the players are ultimately going to win. There's no way to keep doing it this way and have the system stay so restrictive on only one class of person. And there's nothing analogous to this. There's not like they can point to something else and, well, this is the way they do it in this industry or this industry. Every other industry, you get whatever you can bargain for. And so I see the NCAA ultimately evolving and losing in this. And the best way to do it is get everybody that wants to play big time sports under one umbrella and everybody that doesn't under another umbrella. Because I'm getting tired of people saying in the industry saying, boy, you give name, image, and likeness rights, we're going to be cutting sports because we can't pay for it. Like, how does Division II and Division III have sports? They don't generate any revenue. Oh, they pay for it. Like, how do you have an English department? You pay for it. It's really not that hard. And they've constructed this system, which is just an accounting system, by saying that, well, if football and basketball can't pay for it, we can't have it. And their expenses magically rise to the exact level of their revenues. Like, it's all crap. And any thinking person with objectivity knows it. It doesn't mean that sports aren't great. It doesn't mean that being educated isn't great and having a scholarship isn't great. It's a wonderful, valuable thing. But they give them to non-athletes. They give the same scholarships to non-athletes, and we don't call it pay. And we don't demand that they're grateful, and we don't demand that they forego other opportunities while they're in school. We only demand that of an athlete. And I think that's profoundly wrong.
So if things do progress that way, if things get remedied, players are now allowed to be paid, they're allowed to use their name and likeness. Do you see a world where that increases the disparity between, the big time schools and some of the mid-major, low-major schools? Or is there a world where that evens the playing field a little bit?
Well, it's both. I think it will even the playing field in the sense that more teams will be able to compete for better talent. So, give you an example using Michigan again. So if Michigan and Central Michigan, like, there's not a player that Michigan recruits that Central Michigan can get right now, not one. If they're allowed to pay, Central Michigan can probably pay more for Michigan's fifth or sixth best player than Michigan would be willing to pay. So they can probably be competitive for that player that they would never otherwise get. So you've got that. But I don't think the competitive landscape will change as far as who wins and loses, because it's already skewed based upon what you can spend. So there are spending controls and wage controls on what you can provide to an athlete, but there are no controls in spending in any other area as far as like what you can pay for facilities, whether you can have private travel, what you can pay for coaches, all that stuff. So there's no level playing field now. And the truth is, we have 357 teams playing Division I basketball for one reason. They all want money. And the money comes from not only being successful on the court, but it comes from being in Division I. They can look at their donors and say, hey, we are playing with the big boys, and we need your help. And people are more willing to contribute to something they think is a big time thing. Like, I promise you, there are more donors for Division I programs than there are for Division II and Division III. I mean, and a lot of that, they have a lot of people who contribute that don't give a damn about sports. But they have a lot of people that contribute that only give a damn about sports. And if they're not in Division I, they cut out the ones who only give a damn about sports. And so they're running a lot of different businesses. They're running their education programs and their outreach, and they got a hospital and all this other stuff. But they also have an entertainment industry, and that is the sports side. And there are wonderful lessons that athletes learn. I'm not discounting any of that. I'm very grateful for all the stuff I learned. But I was also an entertainer, and they pushed that out and sold it as entertainment, and that's the only reason we played this year. And look, I think it was the right thing to do to play football and basketball this year. But think about this: Name me one non-athlete student that a major university put on an airplane in the last year for a university event. You can't, because they didn't. So the idea that, well, the kids just want to play. So all your non-athlete students, they didn't want to do anything. They didn't passionately want to pursue anything. Like, you shut everything else down and only played sports because of the contracts you had and the money you had to generate and the product you had to deliver. Maybe there is one, but I've asked that question a lot, and I always get in response. Name me one non-athlete student that a university put on an airplane to travel for a university event in the last year. There isn't one.
I can't give you one.
I feel like we could go on this all day, but it seems you have a tea time that you got to get to, which I don't blame you for.
Man. Just practicing.
Hey, man, I love it. But hey, thank you so much. Incredibly insightful. If there's one thing I've taken away from this, it's that you clearly really know your shit when it comes to this stuff. I mean, you've had, it seems, these conversations many a time. So I certainly took a lot away from it. But thank you. I really appreciate you taking the time to join us a little bit and shine some light on the tournament, but also just everything that's going on, with the NCAA and this player empowerment stuff.
No, my pleasure. Good luck to you guys, and thanks for having me. It's my honor.
All right, go flush a 7-iron for me. I appreciate it.
I don't know if I can.